Welcome back. In November, voters will be able to decide whether recreational marijuana will be available here in Florida to anyone 21 years or older. The governor has come out against the proposal, but polls suggest it has a good chance of passing. This week, I spoke to Kim Rivers, the CEO of Trulieve, the cannabis company that spent $40 million to gather the signatures to get the measure on the ballot. I started by asking her how she feels about the road ahead.
We feel optimistic, I would say. Our polling remains and is consistent with the other polls that have happened over the last year and a half or so on this issue. So we are polling above that 60% threshold. That being said, though, to your point, right, 60% is a high hurdle, and Florida is a very diverse state. I'm a born and raised Floridian, so have been through a number on the sidelines, right, of these ballot initiatives, watching intently. And so I think that what's interesting is, as you know, we're about to enter in the normal cycle, right? A very partisan, intense part of campaigns. And so, but for our issue, it really offers somewhat of a reprieve to that, right? We've got our issue, both Democrats and Republicans poll well over 50% on this issue, which I think is surprising to some folks. But I think it's just a testament to really how minds and thoughts have changed as it relates to this issue over the years.
Let me jump in here. Yeah. Let's have this as a conversation. But I wanted to. So let me ask the question this way. I understand why you want this. There's a huge financial motivation to open up the Florida market. Why should Floridians want this, though?
Yeah, I think two primary reasons, right? I think one, it offers a safe and regulated marketplace to allow adults 21 and older to have freedom of choice. Candidly, when we look at the statistics and you look at, for example, cannabis versus alcohol, the data is very, very clear in that it offers a safe and regulated choice, gets folks off of the streets, out of product that may be very dangerous, laced with fentanyl, et cetera, and into a regulated marketplace. I think secondly, for Floridians, it is a tax generator. We have an opportunity and fully expect the legislature to put a tax on this product that can be reinvested into Florida in a variety of ways that also will be up to the discretion of the legislature. So I think you've got the opportunity to offer choice of a safe product and a safe alternative product to other vices that are out there, to adults who are 21 years and up in a very tightly regulated way. And then again, I think you have the opportunity to generate tax revenue. We
can drill down into some of the specifics of some of the policy debate questions, but I want to sort of take a step back for a second. Look, these are the way the rules are. You have money. You had $40 million that you were able to spend to get this on the ballot. Do you think that there is something inherently wrong with the system, though, that it takes someone with such deep pockets? Yes, the folks on the abortion side were able to get it on, but that was through raising a lot of money from a lot of different people, and they still only raised $15 million to be able to do what they did compared to the $40 million you did. How would you answer the charge that you just basically bought yourself access onto the ballot?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is that the Citizens Initiative process in Florida has certainly evolved over the years, right? And it is expensive and it is time consuming. Look, Florida's a huge state, but there is no way to simply buy your way onto the ballot. You still have to get, again, we have over 1 million Floridians that signed their names that had to be verified on the dotted line saying that they wanted to see this issue on the ballot and they wanted the opportunity to vote on it. I think importantly, not only did we have 1 million signatures, but this is the third time with 3 different groups who have asked this court to allow for this issue to be voted on again by Floridians. So sure, did we put an organized effort behind it? Did we take the guidance from the Supreme Court and follow it very, very carefully to give us the best opportunity to be on the ballot? Absolutely, yes, we did. And do I hope in my recovering lawyer idealistic way that there were other ways that that kind of a little less dollar intensive ways for citizens to be able to have their voice heard through a ballot initiative? Yes, I do. But those are the reality. That's the system in which we live. And fortunate that we were able to take the guidance that the court gave us and push forward so that we actually are on the ballot this go around.
I'm just going to stay with money for one more question. I'm going to ask you, if you spend $40 million to get onto the budget, how much are you prepared to spend to win this election?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that remains to be seen. We are very excited, and as I mentioned, we've got a coalition of other companies that have joined hands in terms of putting in dollars and assisting us. We're also, and the campaign has launched fundraising efforts as well from a grassroots standpoint. And so, we're going to do what it takes to make sure that the message is out there. We think it's really important for folks to have all of the facts and for folks to be educated on this issue, and want to make sure that folks are armed with that when they go into the ballot box in November.
So let's talk about some of the issues that you're going to confront as it moves forward. I already hear it, you hear it from the governor, you hear it from others saying, this is a bad idea because we don't want our streets, we don't want everything to smell like marijuana like you do when you go to places like New York or some places in California. And look, when I go home and visit family in Brooklyn, the smell of marijuana is very, very present. Is that what we can expect to have here in Florida?
Well, a couple points. One, I don't want it to smell like that either. I've got two middle schoolers, and and two, I think that Governor DeSantis would be very upset to think that he was comparing himself to Governor Newsom in New York. I don't think that that's the reality in which we operate here as Floridians. We made it very clear in the ballot initiative that legislature has the opportunity and would expect them to regulate time, place, and manner, just like they regulate cigarettes, just like they regulate alcohol use. And I would think that a ban of smoking in public would absolutely be high on that list and would be very expected during the implementation phase post-ballot passage.
I know you just accidentally misspoke. It's Governor Newsom in California,
Oh,
Governor
sorry,
Hochul in New York. And I don't think he would want to be compared to either New York or California. So I think you're good across the board. But again, one of the things you talked about earlier was the notion of safety, that you can have a regulated product, that you don't have to worry about where it's coming from in the street. But there's also another aspect of safety that often gets raised, which is the question of whether or not we will see more impaired drivers, for instance. And I know there are a variety of studies. I know some studies early on suggested that in states like Colorado, it didn't have a huge impact, but I've seen larger studies done since, and that has suggested that the number of accidents and crashes have increased in states that have seen it. How will you address those issues? And is that just part of the reality of what we're going to expect, that there will likely be more accidents and more fatalities because of it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that what we're talking about here is creating a very tightly regulated market, and would fully expect the legislature to come in and to add additional laws. Certainly, we've got resources through the tax revenue that we're going to generate here for the legislature to direct funds to law enforcement, to education campaigns, to making sure that we are very, very clear, and that it's certainly not our intention, nor would we be supportive of an increased driving under the influence for any substance, and this included. I do think that when you, again, are comparing cannabis to alcohol use, the statistics are very clear. There's fewer emergency room visits, there's fewer fatalities, there's fewer instances of addiction. So, again, we are talking about adults over the age of 21, and it is important for folks to act responsibly. Are we going to be able to, catch every single or prevent every single, bad actor from acting a certain way? No, we aren't. But I do think that we can make sure that, again, it's a regulated marketplace, it's as safe as possible, and that we've got good education, fact-based education, and then enforcement from law enforcement to make sure that we are, again, as safe of a marketplace as possible.
Have you heard yet of any organized opposition? I know that some politicians have come out and said, I think this is too radical, or I think this is a problem, but are you aware of any organized group yet?
So far, according to recently made public campaign finance reports, we're not aware of anything being filed officially. But we'll see.
I know I said before I was just going to ask that one last question about money, but I can't help but wonder, again, if you spent $40 million to get on the ballot, if you're willing to probably spend maybe that much or more to pass, how much does Trulieve stand to financially benefit if this passes in the state of Florida?
Yeah, and I mean, again, so a couple of things. One, our core mission is to provide access to cannabis, safe, regulated cannabis products, particularly in the United States. Florida is our home state. It's been, a critical mission of ours since we started. We specifically decided to build our facilities where we built them in the Panhandle, more rural parts of the state, because we really do believe that access is really important. And this is very much in line with our mission. We actually, I mean, sure, will our business improve? Absolutely. We have 20
Well,
million residents.
you're not a nonprofit, right?
We're not a nonprofit. There's 21 million residents and 138 million unique tourist visits to the state of Florida. Where the I'm not sure part comes into play is we're not sure how the legislature is going to roll it out, right? We have 75 words in a ballot initiative. We were very clear that this is a policy statement around, Floridians stating that they want access to safe and legal cannabis, 21 and up. And there's specific possession limitations for personal use that are included in the amendment. But we left a lot of this up to the legislature to regulate exactly how and the ins and outs and how this was going to come to market and to what extent. And so really a lot of that is going to be left to that implementation session after passage. And it's in the hands of our elected officials, which that's their job, is to make sure that however this actually comes to fruition is in line with, I'll call it the Florida way, and draws very, I'm sure, concrete distinctions between Florida, New York, and California, and some other markets that have adult use programs.
We'll be right back after the break.